Evidence for the earliest known use of opium has been discovered in Israel. Opium residue has been found in ceramic vessels that were first discovered in a late Bronze Age burial excavated in 2012. How did opium, harvested in Turkey, packaged in Cyprus, end up in a Canaanite burial in what would have been part of the Egyptian Empire? Can you help explain, please, Rupert?
I will do my very best. I'll repeat a little bit of what you said. This is actually a new study by the Israel Antiquities Authority, along with Tel Aviv University and the Weizmann Institute of Science. And the study has revealed, as Michael said, the earliest evidence of opium used in Israel. Now, the study goes back to excavations originally carried out in 2012 at a site called Tel Yehud, which is near Tel Aviv. And archaeologists excavated a number of Bronze Age Canaanite burials where they uncovered a large group of ceramic vessels. It's a style particularly known as base ring juglets. Now, people had theorised since as far back as the 1960s that these vessels could relate to opium, as the shape of the juglets seems to resemble the capsule of the opium poppy. But fast forward to 2018, when a new technique was refined and used by a team from the University of York and the British Museum, whereby they could extract opium alkaloids from oil residues. Now, in the original 2018 study, the researchers used a base ring juglet from Cyprus to pinpoint opiate residues. So in this latest study, the same techniques were applied to the juglets from the burial site in Israel, which dates to the 14th century BC, revealing opium residues in jugs which are known to have been imported to Israel from Cyprus.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Did you have more?
Hey.
Did I interrupt you?
Not really. I mean, there's some nice quotes from Vanessa Linares, one of the research team. And she said that she's from Tel Aviv University. She said this is the only psychoactive drug that has been found in the Levant in the late Bronze Age. In 2020, researchers discovered cannabis residues on an altar in Tel Arad. Do you know what? I have to digress there slightly, because she mentions that the cannabis residue was found on the altar in Tel Arad. But I do like to point out, I know about that shrine, that altar, and they'd actually mixed cannabis with animal dung so that it burnt at a lower temperature to create laser smoke. It must have stunk like hell, but they certainly got bombed out in there.
Anyway, thank you for the sidebar.
It's a pleasure. But the altar there in Tel Arad actually dates to the Iron Age, so it's significantly later. And she actually points out, she said it's hundreds of years after the opium in Tel Yehud. Because the opium was found at a burial site, she said, it offers us a rare glimpse into the burial customs of the ancient world. And she went on that one must remember that opium is produced from poppies which grew in Asia Minor, that is, in the territory of current-day Turkey, whereas the pottery in which we identified the opium was made in Cyprus. In other words, the opium was brought to Yehud from Turkey through Cyprus. This, of course, indicates the importance that was attributed to the drug. Yes. It is an extraordinary thing, isn't it? Really?
Absolutely. As I said at the beginning, how come it's how come a tradable item originating in Turkey has to go via Cyprus to be packaged, to be imported into the Levant, under the auspice of the Egyptian Empire? It opens up huge questions, which of course we can't answer, but it's a little playground for the imagination, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is, and it's a fascinating thing when you look at, take legalities out of the way, because we have our modern concepts of of people's attitudes to drugs. You know, these days we regard opium as, oh, shouldn't do that. Whereas back then, when people were using it in all sorts of places, I mean, it's in Scythian burials, in in Northern Europe, it's in the Eurasian steppe. I mean, it's the amount of places that opium has been found associated with ritual practices. So, yes, the trade has been there for thousands of years.
So it's been stated that this is the earliest found evidence of usage of opium in Israel. But I think, and some outlets have reported this, that it is the earliest direct evidence of the use of opium in the world. There is indirect evidence of the use of opium elsewhere from way back, from 3,400 BC in Syria, where it's written. But we're talking about the pharmaceutical, a description of the pharmaceutical uses in Syria at the time. And it's funny how, the reports of the use of opium through history are all about the good stuff. It's all about, cures and helpful.
That's true.
How helpful it is to cure this ailment or get you through this problem. And you wonder, underneath all that, right through to our own, the opium wars in the, 17th century, the East India Company, all that, underneath all that.
They were bad people.
And people inventing laudanum and, little concoctions of opium that respectable people could take on a daily basis. Underneath all that, what is going on? But, however, back to the burial itself. The burial itself raises the questions, okay, we've got these jugs with evidence of opium in them. Are we talking about, because remember we're in the Egyptian Empire here, are we talking about containers with this stuff in it put in the grave to accompany the dead into the afterlife because they might need it, or as a reflection of the ceremony around the funeral? We don't know.
No, absolutely. Answers on a postcard, please. I mean, it's actually particularly interesting that when they did the study in 2018, when they were trying to make sure that the technique actually worked, that juglet that they had got, it was in the British Museum, but it was a juglet from Cyprus, and that was still sealed.
Yes, it was.
So I find that quite interesting because, I don't know, I haven't read whether that juglet was associated with a burial or not.
I don't know much about the provenance of that, do we?
No, but it's an interesting thing that, if it was, then that would potentially answer your question that, yes, it would be put in a grave to accompany the departed into the afterlife. But,
but if that is the case, then that speaks to its ubiquity of use for something other than medicinal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Or could do. Just going back to the 2018 the British Museum study. It's interesting, another little sidebar, but before that, although there'd been lots of to and fro about the interpretation of the shape of these jugs representing the opium bulb, that before that they had tested and for morphine, which was the only thing that they could test for up until 2018. Morphine is a makeup of the opiates in opium, unless I'm mistaken. So they did that study. It came up negative, so that the question remained open until 2018. And the reason they didn't find morphine is because that deteriorates over time. So they found out subsequently. So this is particularly nailing the opiates through which actual opium can be identified is important in this case. Yeah,
it just shows the brilliance of the lab techniques. It is extraordinary chemistry that they do.
Absolutely. I think before we close, it's really worthwhile just nailing that for a moment. I did scan, the paper that Vanessa and Linares and Associates had written, and the detail in the chemical process that needs to be gone through to be able to extract this information is so painstaking and detailed that we've got to tip our hats in that direction as ever. You know, to the people that spend hours and hours and hours in laboratories, so that we can help deliver these kinds of headlines and fascinating topics to you. You know,
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I think that's
jolly
it.
Good.
I think we've done Opium.
Yeah.
No, we haven't.
I think
no, we haven't.
Yes.
Folks, like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Do take a look at the link to Patreon in the description down below. See you next time.
Ta-ra.